Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I'm excited to be here today with director of the new film Follow Her, Sylvia Caminer, and then lead and writer of the film, Dani Barker. Hello, how are you both?
Yay, nice to be here.
Excellent.
Very excited to chat about this weird, cool, fucked up movie that I was very into. And Dani, I know that this is actually kind of inspired by real life experiences that you had finding real small jobs on Craigslist, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about like where this kind of script idea came from for you?
Sure. Yeah, the whole idea of her web series live streaming with hidden cameras really came into the story quite late into probably done 4 or 5 drafts on the script by that point. But
Oh,
I had collected feedback from people and they wanted more of Jess. They wanted more backstory from her. So
okay.
that's where this whole, I was like, well, I got a whole backstory from my life. Just throw that in. I really have to even think about it. And then when Sylvia came on and we started workshopping the script, then we started really digging into what kind of jobs she was doing and what would be the most interesting job to open the film, for example, like having a guy locked in a freezer, and that's how that kind of evolved.
And Starvival was your web series, right? Like you did actually
Yeah.
get paid to get tickled and you found jobs on Craigslist, right? Like that's terrifying. I mean, that in and of itself is a horror. It is a horror movie, just like about the positions you could have potentially been putting yourself in.
Yeah, I mean, I was very careful. There's
Yeah.
one thing, for example, when it comes to the fetish world and tickling jobs and foot fetish jobs and all of those,
Yeah.
when people post ads, they're pretty direct often about what they want. And when it's not direct, you have to read between the lines. And those are the ones you have to read between the lines are the ones that I would typically stay clear of if it felt too, like, you really got to trust your instincts. And so when it came to tickling and someone posts an ad for $50 to get tickled for an hour, I'm like, sounds like they want to tickle someone for an hour. I don't really need to read between the lines. So you kind of know what you're signing up for. And then my way of taking precautions was having people go with me, typically men that were much larger than myself, and that's who I titled my bodyguards. So I had ways of, meeting in public
Oh,
places and ways of being safe within that world.
oh yeah. And then, so Sylvia, when did you come in, like in the script process, and kind of what were your thoughts about the script before you guys started workshopping it together?
Yeah, well, so I came in, gosh, was that late 2018?
I think so.
Yeah, I was
Wow. Oh my God.
introduced to Dani through a friend. And so I read the script and I right away saw the potential. And I was like, oh gosh, this is so intriguing. And especially, I knew about Starvival from the friend of mine who sent me the script. So I watched some of her footage. And as a documentary filmmaker, I thought, oh yeah, there's a bit of delving in and learning about this world that I was completely foreign to, but which is one of the things I love about making movies, especially documentaries and unscripted stuff, is that you learn so much about a particular thing. So, Dani, from the first call we had, I think we had to kind of trust each other because it was, my first narrative feature and her first time as a screenwriter for a feature, and also as the leading actor in the film, the movie she carries the film. So we had to kind of trust each other. And together we kind of decided to add the live streaming and bring different elements, but really to kind of dive deep into this world and make it feel real. And the fact that Dani had done some similar stuff, I think, helped us ground it in reality.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the live streaming aspect because I'm a big found footage person. So I love the using of actually showing the live stream and the integration of computers and actually seeing the chat windows and everything like that. I think is such an awesome addition to that. And so like, how did that come into the script? And then what was it like kind of shaping that aesthetic on camera and in the post-production process?
Dani, you want to start with kind of the scripting and then I'll.
Sure. Yeah, totally. The live streaming thing came in as our way of modernizing the story because I've done the hidden camera version of it where it was always recordings through, either this was like 2010. So smartphones weren't popular then.
Right.
And so I had these Kodak cameras that eventually became extinct. I think the company went bankrupt or something, but they looked like smartphones. And so I would always just record them either at my chest or just slightly under the table like this. And people weren't that aware at that time. So it was easy. I got away with it. But then as smartphones became more popular, it became increasingly harder to secretly film people. But coming back to follow her, or like, you know, what exists more in our world today, and it's more about these live streaming platforms, which was really interesting for Sylvia and I to dive into because we didn't really have experience in that particular world.
Okay.
So it like in my prep for the character of Jess, I really just dove in 100% into that world to understand these platforms and how do influencers make money these days, and what kind of content do they post, and yeah, that's kind of how that evolved.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then so putting it into action was definitely really challenging. And it's funny because Dani and I would laugh all the time and say, oh my God, we're making a movie about social media. And we both suck at social media. And it's not like something we were both active on, except now we are because we have to promote this film. But I still am not very good at it. But so I worked a lot with our DP, who's just a brilliant guy, Luke Geisbuehler. And the beauty about Luke is that he did all the Borat movies. So talk about an expert at friggin' hidden cameras, like, holy shit. Right? He works with Sasha all the time. He's
oh my God, he is an expert, like stealth, like probably scarily good at hiding cameras.
And so we wanted it to feel so real that Luke and I were like ordering all these real life spy cameras. We're like, did you know you could get a little pin camera and you could have glasses cameras? And the glasses that we use in the show are actually real glasses cameras, and some of the footage, it's so crappy. We kind of decided like, oh, it's a little too crappy. So, but there are a few shots in the movie that were actually shot on those cameras. So that was really fun. And both of our documentary background helped play into that. But we also had to design the shots thinking about where Dani's, Jess is going to place her hidden camera. So for instance, in the barn, we knew we needed a huge stage for them to all that, blocking and all the actions to happen, because also we knew we would be jumping to like a GoPro shot, which is friggin' see the world. So it has to be interesting. And then they have to remember they're blocking, because we often couldn't shoot it all together because you'd see it in the main camera. So we'd have to do it and strike all the lights and everything as quick as we could and say, okay, guys, you got to hit it exactly. Because we want to be able to like have her walk, have it cut seamlessly.
Also, Sylvia, know what I'm remembering? Sorry, I'm like laughing to myself over here. Do you remember when I had to swap my main glasses for the actual spy glasses?
Yes.
And they were so dorky looking that when I had to actually act the scene with Luke, it was so hard for him to keep a straight face.
Oh my God.
So stupid.
Right.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, no, I know. It was little things like that. And then also like having Dani, because we wanted to see like for influencers and people that just spend their lives like, I mean, God, I had an ex-boyfriend. Every time we would go somewhere, like, holy shit, will you put the camera down and experience the world real, not through the lens of your camera, which is like this much. So we wanted that included in the film. So Dani was often having to shoot herself talking to the camera so that we could then place it next to the eye of God, the main camera shot. So there were a lot of challenges. Oh my God, the graphics. I don't ever want to, there were over 200 graphics.
Those are, the graphics part's really hard too. And like having to design the graphics and make sure they don't look exactly like another graphics package.
Tough as friggin' hell.
It looked awesome. So congratulations. I was like,
props. Wild Union Post, love them. They did an amazing job. And and then designing, the main titles.
The challenges of the graphics, I think looking back now, is we tell so much of the story through the graphics. And I think I would avoid that in the future. Like let the graphics, supplement whatever's happening, but don't try to tell the story through the graphics. And I think that's what is so challenging about social media films, is you really are telling so much of the story through the graphics.
And we talked about that also, because I'm not a huge, there have been some good films done where it's all graphics, but I kind of knew aesthetically it wasn't the type of vision I had for like the the aesthetics of the film. So we talked about trying to go heavy with the graphics early on, let them leave a bit, and then they can come back when they're needed.
Yeah.
And the main title sequence, was so much fun to do. We knew we wanted to, there was a lot of like, I don't like films that have a lot of exposition or like, oh, okay, this is an exposition scene and they're, but we knew there was a lot of information the audience needed to understand about this live Hive world. And so I thought, how do we do that? And Dani and I talked about different ways. We talked about maybe we were going to do like the opening to her show. So you saw different jobs. And it was like, that's not going to give the audience enough. So that was really fun to storyboard that. That was probably the one thing I really storyboarded was every frame, knowing what I wanted kind of to be shown and said and what frame, and bringing in some of Dani's pictures from some of those photos in that main title sequence come from jobs Dani did.
Yeah.
That's so wild. But I want to talk about Jess, because I love Jess's character, because you're giving us an influencer character that isn't, we see a lot of, especially influencer horror, a lot of one-dimensional influencer characters, but Jess is much more complicated. And she's also kind of doing like the cool vigilante thing, but is also like a little bit destructive. And there's a lot of really interesting, complicated, but cool things going on with Jess's character. And I wanted to hear more just about shaping that character together, but then Dani like getting into Jess's head and being this woman who is just trying to survive and is maybe not doing it in the best way, but is also trying to protect women, and the intentions are there, but the execution perhaps is not the best. And I love that. I love complex women characters is what I'm trying to say. So I just want to hear more about shaping her.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. All your questions are great, actually. Jess was one of the most challenging parts of this film too, looking back.
Yeah.
She was never written as a likable character. And it's really, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like men get away with unlikable characters more than women. I don't know, but I would guess that is true. And so, yeah, it was really challenging to shape her in a way that she could still be flawed and feel real and not always making the best moral decisions, which is why she's faced with this moral crisis of whether to take her video down when she exposes someone's face. But making her relatable in the sense that she has big dreams. She's a starving artist with certain things at her disposal, like a decently nice apartment in New York that her dad is taking away, and the challenges of that. So there's like a level of her, kind of being spoiled too.
Yeah.
And also chasing the dream that your parents don't necessarily support, and the challenges that come with that. And that's definitely something that I relate to a lot in the beginning of my career, is like those constant warnings of, go out and there's a running joke with me and my dad. It's like, go out and get a real job. When are you going to get a real job? Is it a real job? It's never gonna be a real job, Dad. When are you gonna be a dentist? Why don't you go to dentist? I hear they're looking for dentists in Salmon Arm.
I get the same thing from my parents with writing. They're like, is that a real job? I'm like,
Right.
Apparently. I am doing something, but I guess.
Yeah, and eventually it's like, I don't think they'll ever really understand what we do for a living, and that's okay to me, like
Exactly.
I'm okay with that reality. As long as I'm paying my rent and I'm getting by and I'm not going back to my dad for money. But like, my dad was a big character in survival in that way. And anyway, a big shout out to Preston Witt, because he really helped shape the character of Jess. And we brought him on as a script consultant, and I can't tell you the amount of hours that Preston and I put in. It was like dissecting line by line for Jess and what that meant for her and who she is in the world. And he was constantly pushing me to go deeper into her psyche and who she is. So I think in the end of the day, Jess is likable enough and we understand her enough. And I really attribute that to my work with Preston. That's and Sylvia too. I mean, we did a lot of work as well. Like Preston and I would go through it, we'd dive deep, and then I would present it to Sylvia, and then her and I had to get on the same page, and ultimately it was kind of approving things at that point.
We did a lot of work. Preston helped a lot with the middle of the film. And then after we shot all the stuff with Luke Cook, with Tom and Jess. Then we had to go back. We went some months later, we shot the opening and the close. So then I would say you and I spent a tremendous amount of time figuring out how to make her likable enough, because we edited together that whole section, which I loved. Boy, I wouldn't mind doing this again, except, shrinking the time to kind of see what the ups and downs were and what we could do to make, Jess believable, to play with her flawed tendencies and, her moral, dilemma and making her a bit, morally questionable, which we both really loved. We like, that's true to life. We're all flawed. And when you're so focused on achieving a goal and you're feeling, your life is falling apart and this is all you have, you tend to get drawn down the rabbit hole, and so that was all part of, and also even little things like that apartment, huge, gorgeous apartment. No one her age could afford that apartment. So we had to bring in the story, but we needed a stage there because that was important to have room and hard as hell to find an apartment we could shoot in. So then it became very important in the film to realize that was all going to be taken away from her and that it wasn't hers. It was her father's, and that would drive her. And also what Dani was talking about with her dad, that I thought would make her more relatable to the young people in the world, who are struggling as an artist or following their dream that their parents, their dad doesn't understand and everything's in jeopardy. So I think that helped to make Jess likable enough to really want to go on the ride. That's all we want. We just want you to be interested and want to go on that ride with her.
Well, and it's so great. And it also brings up like her privilege and having access to money, but not anymore. And a lot of people and that's a huge conversation now. And I think that's something that makes her like a little bit to some people, but at the same time, empathetic. And I like that. You don't shy away from like making her really likable and and I love that. I think we're gonna have to wrap up soon, but you, Dani, and Luke Cook are like really just doing a lot of crazy shit together for a lot of this movie, just the two of you. And so what was that like to work with him and figure out this dynamic? Because he is at one point, no spoilers, unhinged behavior, scary and so uncomfortable, and really epitomizes that feeling of I have to leave this place. This guy is going to do something bad to me. and you evoke that terror so well. So what was that like working with him and all of your scenes together in the barn?
Luke is a pro, so he came in and he was warmed up after working on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and all these other projects. And I come in and I'm cold. I haven't worked on anything in 2 years because I had stepped out of the industry. So Luke admits that he didn't make it easy for me because it was very much in and out of character. I didn't know when he was the character.
Oh my God.
Offset. And so I was very much on edge even when we weren't shooting, but ultimately it worked for the character because I couldn't read him. I didn't know what he was thinking half the time. And I was like, oh, he hates it here. He hates this set. And I'm trying to people please and also wearing all these different hats and trying to get my head out of the script and making changes to the script on set. It was a bit of a mess at times, but yeah, Luke is the character. We knew from the first audition tape that he sent that he was the guy. And so how he made it so easy was that Luke is such a brilliant improviser that all I had to do was really just react off of him. I didn't have to be the one there. I didn't feel like I was carrying it. I felt he was carrying it and all I had to do was respond. As long as because I had done my prep beforehand, I'd done my prep around Jess and who I felt she was and what my intentions were in the scene. So that allowed me to let go of the lines and everything else so that I could just be present with Luke and react with him. So
a lot of that was improvised?
Oh, there was some of the best lines in the movie are improvised by Luke. We always kept to the structure of it. We always kept to the scenes, and a lot of the lines did stay the same. But Luke came up with some of the most iconic lines from this film.
Oh, you think of the one when he's with a big old butt when he's typing the scripts and he yells with a big old butt, and
you can pretty much tell which ones are his. There's different energy around it. Yeah. Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
that one. Toe in mouth now was one of
Yeah.
his.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Wow.
if I could just say one thing that I think really helped was that Dani, when I talked with Luke, we had a little bit of rehearsal, not a ton, but I knew kind of where he shifts, and it's like, okay, he's now like a completely different person, and this is the real guy. We needed such danger and the potential for him to do anything, because to keep the tension going for that next like 10 minutes or 7 minutes with him, you had to believe he could do anything, that nothing was off the table. But we didn't ever tell Dani how intense he was going to go. So I think, she was really like, when he's like, when she's tied up, she kind of, I think that helped you. I've heard you say that you were just like legitimately like a little bit freaked out, because it was pretty intense, some of that stuff.
It was super intense. Yeah, I was freaked out. And then I also was in and out of the script thinking, this isn't how I wrote it.
I know.
That's gotta be so weird. You're like, they have taught me at my own game. I actually don't know where we're going anymore.
Yeah,
Like, what's
totally. It's a strange thing to be on set as the writer acting in it. I don't know how people
really
do it when
hard.
they're directing, acting, and writing. That's great.
Yeah, that
well,
would be really
in a
fun.
sense, that would be easier because you're kind of executing whatever vision you had in the script. But yeah, that scene definitely surprised me. I was like, whoa, Sylvia, what's going on? Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I could ask you so many more questions, but we have to wrap up. But this was so awesome to chat with you both about Follow Her. It's really, I think, an important piece of like influencer adjacent horror that we need more of. So thank you both so much.
Thanks, Mary Beth. I love all your masks in the background, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I'm a big horror nerd over here. So
love it. Awesome. Thank you. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you for this.
Thank you so much. I have so many more questions, but this is an awesome movie, and I really appreciate y'all being so generous with your time and your answers.
Awesome.
Of course, anytime.